so you should be open at page 126, and you should already have your vocab notebook open to a new clean page in the social studies section. The title of today's notes is Chapter 4, Lesson 3, and it's called Growth of the Northeast, and then you need today's date, February 24th, 2021. We are starting a new lesson, so you're going to start with number 1. Once you're done with that, go ahead and put your vocab notebook underneath your textbook. And then be ready to read and follow along on page 126. You've got to write that.
Miss Phyllis,
Yes, sorry.
is my microphone focused on me?
Yes. Carla, please read first, starting with the lesson title on page 126. Loud and slow. Carla, if you're reading, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. I think something, are you talking right now? Yeah, I think something might be wrong with your microphone. I'm gonna call on somebody else and I'll give you a chance because I don't hear anything, not even like background noise or anything. So we'll give you a chance to get it fixed, okay? And I'll call on you later. Colin, please read. So just follow along for now and then maybe you can get it fixed later, okay? Go ahead.
Growth of the Northeast. You are there. It's 1800.
A little louder.
We'll be lucky if we made it in 2 weeks. Your father says as he finishes loading the wagon. This is your family first.
Not family. This is your
family's first long trip from Philippines.
Not Philippines. You're doing that thing where you go.
Philadelphia
There you go.
to Boston.
Very good. Because would it make sense to say from the Philippines to Boston back in the 1800s? Did they have planes or anything like that back then? And is the Philippines in the Northeast? No. Okay.
In the city, the bumpy
That's a compound word. So find where one word ends and read that word.
Cobblestone.
You added extra syllables, but it's cobblestone. Is cobblestone, is that a word? What about cobblestone?
In the city, the bumpy cobblestone streets make your teeth rattle. Outside the city, the dirt road is full of big holes, tree stumps, and mud. When you finally stop for the night in
Just sound it out. It's a city name, so, but it's spelled exactly how it sounds.
Treden,
Not Treden. That's an N. How would you say T-R-E-N?
Trent,
Tren. and then T-O-N. Bless you.
On.
So Trent-un. Put it together.
Trenton.
Not Trenton, but Trent-un.
Trenton. When you finally stop for the night in Trenton, New Jersey, your body aches.
Aches.
You lie in the back of the wagon, trying to fall asleep, but you can't stop thinking. 250 more miles to go.
So, back in 1800, that's how they had to travel. Philadelphia to Boston is probably like, maybe now, I don't know, maybe like a 2 or 3 hour drive, if even. But back then, it took days, because how did they travel from Boston? We can use cars now, or even planes, or even trains. But how did they have to travel back in 1800? Ethan? On a wagon. How do wagons move? Lena?
Like a horse or a donkey.
Like a horse or a donkey pulls it. Can a horse or a donkey go as fast as like the motor in a car or a train or whatever? Or a plane? No. And also think about how bumpy it is. What were the wheels of the wagons made out of? Mason? Wood. Did they have rubber around it like our tires do? No, our tires help to make it smooth as we're driving. We may still hit bumps, but the tires, they have what in them? Our tires have what inside of them? Zari.
Rubber.
Well, what do they have inside? They're made of rubber, but what do they have inside? Carla?
Air.
Air. So think of a balloon. If you like press on a balloon, is it going to pop? No, it just kind of moves in. Well, that's the same thing, the air in a tire. So even if we hit bumps, it's not so bad. Whereas back then, it was made of wood. So everybody inside the car felt every single, or not the car, the wagon, felt every single bump along the way. And Cullen read about cobblestone streets. Cobblestone streets are streets made out of like stones. If you've ever been to like an old city, like Savannah, Georgia, or Boston, or something like that, or even some cities down in Florida, you may see roads that when you look, they have stones that look like this. And then there's like grout in the middle. But they're bumpy, right? So think of a wooden wagon wheel going over that. They're going to bump over every single one. And then in the dirt roads, there's lots of rocks in dirt roads. Even nowadays, there's lots of rocks in dirt roads. They felt every single one of them. So do you think it was very comfortable to travel back in the 1800s? Not at all. But now it's really comfortable. Well, this chapter is going to help us to understand what happened that led us from these wagons to planes and trains and cars like we have now. Yes, Ethan, quickly. They did have boats, but would it make much sense to travel? Think about where Philadelphia is in Pennsylvania and Boston. Would it make much sense to go on a boat? No, because there probably weren't really any easy rivers that went straight between the two places. Okay, but yes, they did have boats, which would be a lot more comfortable. But if you're trying to go, like, it would be like going from Memphis to Nashville. Can we take a boat from Memphis to Nashville? No, there's not water that we can travel on. I mean, we could take the Mississippi River up to where it meets the Tennessee River in Kentucky, and then take the Tennessee River all the way down to Mississippi and then back up to Nashville. But would that make much sense? No. Okay, read next. Lena. Loud, loud, loud.
Early transportation. In our nation's early history, people had two choices for transportation: road or water.
Oh, that's like what we were talking about, what Ethan just said.
Most roads were rough dirt paths. Most roads were rough dirt paths. Traveling on them by horse and wagon was hard and slow. Water travel was often faster.
So you may be thinking, but horses can go really fast, because we've seen like pictures or videos or maybe even real life horses running. But a horse is an animal, right? They have like lungs and everything. Would you be able to run nonstop for like 100 miles or 300 miles? No. So how would a horse be able to run at full speed for 300 miles? It couldn't. So they have to go really slow too so that they don't get too tired and bad things happen. Now it says water travel was often faster. But was that always an option? No. So they needed to probably figure out more ways to travel. Oh, Lena, go ahead and keep reading. Sorry.
Okay. Northeast waterways. The Northeast had many waterways or bodies of water that boats can use.
Pause. What's our first word, Lena?
Waterways.
Waterways. What kind of word is waterways? What kind of word is waterways? Mason? A compound word. It's two smaller words, or sometimes more than two, put into one larger word. What are the two small words, Mason?
Water and ways.
Water and ways. Well, we know ways are paths to travel. Water is the wet stuff. So that must mean, waterways, that must mean that they're paths to travel on water. Let's find out. Lena, what is the actual definition?
Large bodies of water. Well, deep.
Oh, we're not there yet. Look at the sentence. So we have a comma and then it says or. Usually that means what comes next is another way to say it. In this case, the definition.
Or bodies of water that boats can use.
So waterways are bodies of water that boats can use. Remember, if you can't see it up here, it's right there in the book. I didn't change anything. We didn't change anything about that definition. Yes, Mason.
In body, you got rid of the I and got IES.
Very good, because body, singular, is, you don't have to write this, but B-O-D-Y. We know if a noun ends with consonant Y, to make it plural, we take off the Y, add I, and then ES. Very good, Mason. Good observation. Lena, when you're done, go ahead, count to 10, like fast, slow, like 1, 2, 3 in your head, and then keep reading. Like you can do the one Mississippi counting. That's what I should have said.
Deep harbors lined the Atlantic coast in the east. The Great Lakes lay to the west.
Navigable.
Navigable rivers deep enough and wide enough for ships to use flow across the region.
So what's our second word, Lena? Navigable. So what is it? Navigable. Navigable. Now, I see that what comes next, it says navigable rivers, which are rivers deep enough and wide enough for ships to use. Well, that defines navigable rivers, but does it describe navigable? Not really. So what should we use to find a good definition? Zari.
The glossary.
The glossary. So, everybody, keep a hand on page 126 and then go to the glossary. Once you find a definition for navigable, remember a glossary is just like a mini dictionary, just instead of every word. It has only words that go with the book. Cullen, I saw your hand first. What does navigable mean?
Deep and wide enough for ships to use.
Okay, so it's still talking about navigable rivers. Well, that's okay. Navigable means deep and wide enough What was it called? It was the same as this, wasn't it? Yeah. Deep and wide enough for ships to use. It was the same. So navigable means deep and wide enough for ships to use. Zari, count to 10, like doing 1 Mississippi. Then go ahead and keep reading. In your head, not out loud. I mean, count in your head, not out loud.
Not all of these waterways connect. However, the Appalachian Mountains separate waterways in the eastern part of the Northeast from those in the western part.
Okay, good. But Zari, make sure that if there's an ed at the end of the verb, make sure to say that ed sound, the id, or sometimes it's just d. So don't forget that, okay? Because otherwise you're changing past tense to present tense. And are we talking about what's happening right now? No, we're talking about what's happening a long, long time ago. Okay, keep going, Zari. Everybody make sure you're using your finger to follow along.
Linking waterways. In 1817, state leaders in New York came up with a plan to link the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. The hard workers built a...
Zari, try again.
They had workers build a canal, a waterway dug across land.
So what's our next word, Zari?
Canal.
Canal. And what is a canal, Zari?
A waterway dug across land.
A waterway dug across land. So it's like what they said, what Zari read in the paragraph before this. There were lots of important waterways, but not all of them connected. How can you get a boat from one river to another if they never cross? Can you do that? Smith?
No.
No, you can't. But what if they had really important goods that needed to get there a lot faster than like a horse-drawn wagon could bring them? Well, what they did was people went in and they dug these new waterways, these canals, from one place to another so that the ship could sail down and then turn, sail, like say they wanted to get from this city to this city, and then get there. So instead of having to go here, take a horse-drawn wagon, then back on the water, they just built these new waterways between these canals to make it faster and easier. Zari, keep going. Everybody make sure you're using your finger to follow along.
The new canal, the Erie Canal was completed in 1825. It connected to the New York City of Buffalo on Lake Erie and Tro.
Not Tro. How would you say that? How do you say?
Troy.
There you go.
On the Hudson River from Troy, ships traveled down the Hudson River to the New York City on the Atlantic coast.
There you go. So now they needed a way to get from the Great Lakes, where Buffalo was. Buffalo is on Lake Erie. We know Lake Erie is one of the Great Lakes because of the acronym HOMES. Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior, which I think we'll learn more if we get to the Midwest. They needed a way to get from the Great Lakes down to the Atlantic coast. Well, there were some waterways, but none that connected. So they created the Erie Canal to connect Lake Erie to the Hudson River, which flowed to New York City, and then the coast, the Atlantic Ocean. Please make sure that you're focusing. A lot of you are zoning out. If you stay focused, we may be able to finish this lesson today, which would be ideal. Ethan, please read next, loud and slow. Ethan. You can pull your mask down because you have your face shield on while you read. Okay? Read loud. Yeah.
Railroads connected much of the Northeast. In many places, people use these instead of canals. Even so, people continue to build north canals such as St.
Lawrence.
Seaway for transportation and shipping.
Transportation.
Shipping.
Good. So they used those canals for a while, but then by the early 1900s, they had railroads, so the trains started, which trains were easier than water, because which one do you think would be easier? To dig a big ditch and then let water fill it, or lay down railroad tracks? Lena? Lay down railroad tracks, because all you have to do is put them down. You don't have to dig the hole and then wait for it to fill with water. You just put them down. And then also better roads. They still didn't have cars, but roads were starting to be paved, so it was a lot easier for those wagons and things like that to travel over a smooth road than like a bumpy dirt or cobblestone road. So they didn't need the ships as much because it was getting faster. Trains were a little faster than water, or than boats, and they could go more places, and the roads were getting better, so short journeys were going faster. Please make sure. There's a lot of you zoning out. I think one person at school, maybe two, were actually listening when I just said that. So if I asked some of you to repeat what I just said, you would have no idea. Or to summarize what I just said, you'd have no idea. You've got to focus. Okay. Go ahead and turn the page. And read next, Kingston. Loud and slow.
Industrial Revolution.
Louder.
Industrial Revolution. As transportation improves in the northeast, so did its industries. People replaced the machines powered by hand with new sources of power. New machines allowed people to make more goods faster. This period is known as the Industrial Revolution.
So, Kingston. What's our next word?
Industrial Revolution.
Industrial Revolution. Now, is there a good easy to pull out definition right there? No. So where should you go to find a good definition? Good. Okay, he can do it because he doesn't have, well, he might have another one. Go ahead. What is the Industrial Revolution, Kingston?
A period in which new sources of power were used to replace machines powered by hand.
Good. Hold on. Because I can't remember all that. A period in which new sources of power replaced. Now I can't. What comes next? Or is it not? Is replace not what comes next?
No, it said a power that was used to replace.
Oops, sorry. So, a period in which new sources of power that were used to replace machines powered by hand. That were used to replace machines powered by hand. Okay, next.
Allowing people to make more goods faster.
Good. Allowing people to make more goods faster. So, the Industrial Revolution was a period of time in which new sources of power were used to replace machines powered by hand, allowing people to make more goods faster. That last part, allowing people to make more goods faster, is one of the most important things that came out of the Industrial Revolution. It used to be all the machines were powered by hand. Like sewing machines they didn't look like what they did now. They looked like, if you've seen Beauty and the Beast, not Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, they have that, oh my gosh, why can't I remember the name of that thing? What is the name of it?
Spinning wheel.
A spin wheel, yes. A spinning wheel. They had that spinning wheel to make stuff. So it was like that big thing where somebody had to like press a pedal with their foot to make the wheel spin as like the thread and stuff came out. Yes.
I've actually been to like a museum, and they were showing us a bunch of stuff, and they showed us that they were actually making.
Yes.
And it took forever.
Exactly. So Erin says she went to a museum somewhere where somebody was actually making something with the spinning wheel, and it took forever. So imagine if you have a school sweater on, not this fleece, but the sweater. I think, Colin, do you have a sweater? No, you have a fleece on.
It was Zadie that had it.
Zadie had a sweater on. Do you have a sweater? Yes. Lena has a sweater. So imagine your sweater being made on a spinning wheel. It would take like at least an hour for somebody who's really good at it to make one sweater. Well, how many kids in this school need school sweaters? A lot more than one. Plus all the other schools that also need sweaters. So if we still had spinning wheels, those sweaters would be really hard to get and they'd be extremely expensive. But because of what happened during the Industrial Revolution, where machines kind of stopped being powered by hand, more of those sweaters, more of the goods were be able to create it faster. Because they were be able to be created faster, that meant it was easier to get them. Because more of them were able to be made, that meant that they became cheaper. It also meant people could spend more time making things better. So a wagon, they spent more time on figuring out how can we make it faster. Well, now that we don't have to rely on horses anymore, we can put motors in them. Now let's spend time making them faster. We don't have to make the motors anymore, so let's figure out how we can take the motors and make them faster, to the point where now we have the cars that we have today. Quickly, please, come on. Yes, Colin.
When we turn the page, I found this, and it doesn't even look like it goes to this.
Oh, this is from a long time ago. I had this book. It's like Carly's. That's from something else. You can use it as a bookmark or you can throw it away. Okay, Kingston, please continue reading. Louder.
Machines and power. In the early 1800s, factories that used machines powered by moving water opened along rivers.
It's exactly how you would think.
Textiles.
There you go.
Mills were the first factories to use those machines. A textile mill is a factory that uses machines to weave cloth.
Okay? So, what's our next word, Kingston?
Textile mill.
Textile mill. Textile mill. And, textile mills came about during this time, and they were very, very, very important. What is a textile mill, Kingston?
A textile mill is a factory that uses machines to weave cloth.
A factory that uses machines to weave cloth. If you're at a factory used to weave cloth, what do you think that factory is making? Aaron? Clothes. Because what are clothes made out of? Colin?
Cloth.
Cloth. So textile mills were some of the first factories to come around, and they were used machines to weave cloth. Before that, people had to use spinning wheels, looms, if you've ever seen a loom where they make like rugs or quilts or blankets, I mean. So how many was one person able to make at once when they used spinning wheels and looms? Mason? One. But now we have machines that can weave cloth, like what we see on the top of page 128. How many sweaters do you think they're able to make using this machine at one time? Smith?
Like 1,000.
A lot. And do you think they only had one of these machines? Look at the picture. What do you see in the background? Colin?
Another machine.
Another machine. So how many sweaters, and do you think those are the only 2 machines in this factory? No, there are tons. So instead of having one person hand make one sweater at one time, they now were able, because of this water power, remember the water was able to run through like big wheels and things like that and create power to run these machines. Now they're able to make hundreds or even thousands of sweaters at one time, which made them easier to get, which meant everybody was able to get a sweater instead of having to wait for one person or find one person to make you a sweater and then wait for them to be done. Now you could just go to a store and buy a sweater, and it was a lot cheaper. Think about now. You may know people who make t-shirts, and you tell them what you want on the shirt and they make it for you. It takes a while because you have to wait for them to get done, and it might be kind of expensive. Like it may be like $20 to buy that shirt. Like think about the IC shirts that we buy. they're like $15, $20. But if you go to Target and you buy a t-shirt off the rack, how much is that t-shirt usually? Aaron?
Like $2.
Like $2, especially a plain one. That's because, think about it, the person making our IC shirts is having to make them by hand. I mean, they may use a machine, but do you think a person who makes these in their spare time has a big machine like this? No, or even the modern version. No, they just have like their little machine where they're maybe able to make 1 or 2 shirts at a time. Also, do they make that many of them? Do they make hundreds or thousands? The person with the IC shirts? No, they just make like 50 or maybe 100. But about Target, does a random person in their house make those Target t-shirts? No, they're made at a big factory that has the modern versions of these machines that can make even more than these, and so they're able to sell them for really cheap because they have a lot of them and they made them cheaply and fast. Yes?
You can also make designs on a blanket.
Yep, that's true. You can also do that, which is still like if you want your friend to make you a blanket with a design on it, it's going to be a lot more expensive than going to Target and buying a blanket that they already have there. Okay. Smith, read next.
In the mid-1800s, steam engines began to power machines in factories. Steam engines had already improved transportation. They provided power for boats and trains.
Keep going.
In 1882, Thomas Edison opened the world's first electric power plant in New York City. In time, power plants provided electricity across the country. Country.
Yep, you're right.
They led to spread of other inventions, including Edison's light bulb and Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. By the early 1900s, the United States was a leading industrial nation.
So what happened is, originally everybody was just doing stuff by hand. Either using their own power or maybe like a horse or a donkey or something like that. But then they realized they could use moving water. Think about if you've seen the Mississippi River, That water moves a lot faster than a person or a dog, or if you imagine a horse. Probably never seen a horse running along the Mississippi River, but it moves faster than you. You've probably seen a dog move along a river. It moves faster than the animals. So they realized, hey, that moving water can make things go a lot faster. So we should use that moving water to power our machines. Then they realized if they heat up the water and make steam, that can make smaller. They don't have to make it right on a river. They can move small amounts of water, put them in an engine, heat them up, and then it can make that go faster like a train. Does a train run through the water? So we can't rely on the speed of the water. We have to move the water, then we can heat it up, and the steam makes it go faster. Well, then they discovered electricity, which electricity can go anywhere and it moves even faster than the water. So now they're using electricity to make things go even faster. So as time's going on, this is only a span of like 20, 30, 40 years. They go from everything being done, let's see, 1, 2, definitely 2 people zoning, 3 people zoning out. Eyes here, focus. I don't like having to call people out for not focusing, but it's not helping when I go focus. Because if you're not focusing, you're not hearing or seeing this. But if I call your name, then maybe you will hear me. I don't want to have to do that. That's embarrassing. I don't want that to happen to me. So I definitely don't want to have to do it. But if that's what it takes, I'll do it. I don't even remember where I was now. I guess
You were explaining how now electricity moves faster.
okay, but onto a new. And I don't remember what, so I guess that we won't more time to do other things and we can move on. We have more time to move on to the next chapter, which I'd like to finish the next chapter before spring break. Okay. Michaela, please read next, loud and slow.
Immigrants.
Louder.
Immigrants.
Immigrants.
During the 1800s and early 1900s, millions of immigrants came to the United States. Most came by boat from Europe, arriving in New York. Their first stop was Ellis and Island
Not Island. What is that word?
Island, the nation's largest immigration center.
You gotta read louder.
Immigrants came to the United States from different
Stay loud. Yell.
regions. Most had difficult lives in their homeland. Many were poor. Some had been treated very
Not barely.
badly because of their race or region,
Not region.
religion.
So not only are machines getting better, and we're getting more and more machines during this time, but also more and more people are coming to the United States. I will read next. Now, this is where a lot of you definitely start to tune out. It's like you hear my voice and you're like, oh, it's not my turn. I'm just going to go off somewhere else. Do not do that. It's not a smart idea. Here, immigrants hoped to make a better life. For them, the United States was the land of opportunity. A person who worked hard could be a success. Immigrants moved to every part of the nation. However, millions stayed in the Northeast to work in factories. Most settled in cities, such as New York City, Trenton, or Boston. The result was enormous urban growth, or growth of cities, in the region. So, think about it. Where are most factories located? Where are most factories located? What types of places? I'm not asking you for a specific name of a place, like they're in Memphis. I'm asking for what type of place. Lena?
Like cities?
Cities. Because what is needed in order for a factory to work? Like, how do we get the machines running?
Water.
Cullen?
Power.
Power. But just because we have power, does that make the machines go? Electricity, but just because of that, does that make them go? Think about it. If no one's here, can the lights turn on? What do factories need in order to keep going? Smith.
People.
People. Where do the people live? Do they live out in the country or do they live in the cities? Zari.
More likely in the country.
Carla?
In the city.
In the cities. Less people live in the country. That's why it's the country. They don't need as many buildings. They don't need as many houses. They don't need things to keep people entertained. Cities are where the people live. So cities are where they wanted to put the factories, especially back then, because even if we look at this picture on the top of page 128, did the machines just work all by themselves? Who is making sure that the machine is working properly? Cullen.
People.
People. Specifically, look at these people.
Oh, people.
What are these people? Mason? Kids. Back then. Because look, they're small. They can crawl on top of the machines. Adults might break them. Luckily, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Some of you could be in a factory working right now. Is that what you want? You want to go work in a factory and crawl up? Look at what happens. Look at what they're standing on. What happens if they slip? What happens to their foot?
They fall.
It gets crushed. Do you want to work there? Okay. I'll tell your mom that you'd rather go work in a factory and make her some money. instead of her paying?
Teacher.
Okay, so especially back then, because they needed people to, even though they had better sources of power, they still needed people to make sure that they worked and they stayed working and they turned on and all of that. Now we need less of them. That's why sometimes we see more factories kind of out further out of the cities now. But back then, they needed people to make sure that the machines were running and running properly. So as people came into the country back in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, where do you think all the jobs were? Mason? In the cities. What was one reason they came to the United States? For what? Lena?
Freedom?
Freedom, but what else? Carla?
Shelter.
Shelter. What do you need in order to have shelter? Colin?
Job.
A job?
And money.
Money. Is there going to be money out in the country where there aren't really any jobs? No. So if you're coming to the United States for the first time in the 18 and 1900s and you have no money because you're coming from a place where you are poor, and you know this is a place where there's opportunity, are you going to move out to the country where there are no jobs? And you have no money to buy land to start a farm or to even buy the animals or seeds you need? Where are you going to stay? Aaron, in the city, what are you going to do? Colin?
Get a job and get money.
Get a job. Where are you going to get a job? Ethan? In a factory. So that's why the cities that we know of as big cities are so big, because of this urban growth. People entered the country in the cities, and they stayed in the cities because that's where the jobs were. So urban growth is the growth of cities. Okay, we're not gonna be able to finish today because we need to talk about reading really quick, and then we need to pack up in 6 minutes. So, finish number 6. We will start with the next column on, I guess, Monday. Maybe Friday. We might do it on Friday. I might switch some things around, and we might do this on Friday. I think we are going to do this on Friday because then we can start religion, the next chapter, on Tuesday. Yeah, so we're going to do this Friday instead of religion. That's what I've decided. Okay, so go ahead and put away your social studies book.